question and answers.
Well, thank you very much, Paul. You certainly sounded very, very calm through all of that. And as things were progressing, our audience was getting rather more excited as well, because a number of questions starting to come through, Paul.
Good.
So I think if we take an opportunity to discuss them before we then later close with the relevance of the relationship with BritCham and the opportunity that we're going to present our participants today. Yeah, okay. There's an interesting point being raised, and I did put in the box that people had the option to be anonymous if they wish. So I don't know if this person wishes or not. I'm going to treat it anonymously. He considers himself a millennial,
Right.
getting near to 40.
Yes.
But based on your comment that really people observe leaders and take the traits and then mimic, I think words to that effect. He says he's struggling to motivate or connect with millennials, people of his own category, because they don't want to accept your lead. They're not bothered with track records. They don't seem to matter to them. They believe that they can change the world in the same manner as Mark Zuckerberg, for example. So how can leaders lead such a team?
Well, the first thing is that you've got to be a little bit careful, thinking as a team, that they're all going to be motivated in the same way. I mean, even if they're from the same generational cohort. So the first thing to say is that don't sort of lump everybody into the same bracket. And really the first thing you have to do, of course, though, is to connect with the way they think about the world. No one was able to influence anyone without first of all connecting with them. So the first thing you must do is to try and get them to listen. And if your messaging is all through your own demographic, like for my example is that, I'm a baby boomer. If I only speak to people through those baby boomer values, a lot to do with sort of loyalty and trust and all the rest of it, and others, then I'm not going to get millennials listening. So I think the first thing to do is to get them listening. And I'm afraid that means adapting your communication style first to get them listening to your messages. I think then you stand much more chance of influencing. But to do that, you need to be able to pick up the cues of what's really driving them. And as I said before, at the individual level, there will be 6 different things that may well be driving them. And you have to dig down into that individual level.
Okay, thanks, Paul. The next question relates to staying calm and reminds me of a story a leading professor of the medical profession mentioned to me. He says, ideally when you've been bitten by a poisonous insect and somebody knows that they've got 30 seconds to live, but they'll live a bit longer if the speed at which the toxin goes into the blood slows down. So you want them to stay a little bit calm. So maybe you have a chance to get an antidote. So this issue of staying calm, what actually can be done, particularly at times like this that are extraordinary, unprecedented? Clearly, everybody is challenged to some degree or other, stressed, whether it's financial targets, family, whatever it might happen to be. How do you lead on this stay calm?
Sure. Thanks, Chris. Well, a couple of things. The first is a very practical thing. It does, and it relates to sport, but you don't have to be sporty to do this. But it's very important for our emotional well-being and our level of ability to control our emotions that we improve our physical fitness. Because in effect it's a calming measure, because we learn how to breathe. I've got a story for you in a minute about learning how to breathe more deeply, and not speed up our heart rate, or know how to calm our heart rate when it is speeding up. So physical fitness does matter at this time, or any time, to remain able to calm yourself down. And the other thing is, it reminds me of me leading a team of directors through a cave system, a deep cave system, and me getting stuck. I got stuck. I was the lead. I was the lead of this pack of directors through a cave system, and got stuck. And what happens is your mind goes blank. Your heart begins to race. And I learned so much about, first of all, trying to practice different scenarios before they happen, so that you can get a feel and anticipate how you might respond. Of course, breathing, I wasn't breathing because I was panicking, right? So again, just sort of stepping back for a moment, calming yourself down, because otherwise you can't do the adaptiveness, because your mind isn't in a state to be able to think through alternatives, or in this case, alternative decisions or alternative actions. So I think practicing through scenarios or practicing through real life is the way to go with it.
Okay, thank you. And we did get a prompt there also from one of the attendees in relation to that: mindfulness, meditation, positive psychology, which yes, one may also rely on. A little bit of clarification called for here by one attendee, Paul. Sure. Are the 6 individual levels of communication that you allude to, getting people listening, yes, the connection, contribution, growth, certainty, significance, and choice?
So let me try and answer it. And I'm not quite sure whether I'm answering it specifically or sufficiently, but let me try and give an answer. So just to be clear first, for the personal values sensitivity, as I said, there are my own research and use of that particular practice around the world is that people are motivated by normally 6 different types of things. Only one of which is material reward, i.e., pay and rations and so on. As the other questioner said, millennials are now often more driven by something we call world citizen. Because they are interested in some of the climate change issues, yes, that we're experiencing. The communication style is more related to the emotional intelligence, and there are 6, and again, there are 6 different ways that you may have to adjust. So, for example, you may have to adjust in terms of communicating. You may have to move from an assertive style, for example, to a coaching style, depending on the response that you get from the person. You may have to be more affiliative. You may have to show more emotion at certain parts of the communication and conversation as well. So you need to learn these 6 different emotional intelligence-based leadership approaches as well, because any conversation can often contain different facets where you have to switch your style. And the coaching mentoring style is the one that you need in all change environments. If there was one practice, one of the 12 practices I would recommend everyone to learn more about, it would be the one-to-one dialogue. Quite simply put, coaching and mentoring.
Thanks very much, Paul. This is an interesting question from an executive that also is concerned with understanding how best to get buy-in for a situation from peers, more particularly perhaps a board of directors or a board of management. What do you suggest is needed in terms of doing that?
Well, the first thing is, of course, it depends. If you're looking to influence upwards, which I think this is what we're talking about here. It's important first. I mean, sometimes it's difficult because boards and senior management teams don't have the clarity. They don't have the clarity of purpose, or they're not able to communicate it well. Therefore, they don't have the clarity of what should we be innovating and creating at the moment in terms of priority products and services, or changes to the organizational structure or environment. So in other words, they haven't really sold the story very well, because they haven't had enough clarity there, or they're not clear enough about the implementation, which is the third clarity, or the clarity of the reputation. What are we trying to achieve here? What do we want our brand to represent in terms of, to our employees and customers? So sometimes it's difficult, and it may be that you just have to go back and ask more questions so that they do clarify those four things. Because without that, it's very difficult. Once leadership starts to get fragmented across an organization, mixed messages occur. And people, as I said before, they do concentrate on communication, but they concentrate more on action, on lived reality, on what they see leadership putting into place day in, day out. And so if there isn't consistency on those four clarities, then there's more work to be done. So I think that's a requirement for that person, you know, to try and go back and work it through, work the clarity through even more, and then everyone will be in a better place.
Thanks, Paul. Before I ask two final questions, because we're running out of time, is it okay with you, for those people that want extra elaboration or whose questions I can't cover in the time that we have, is it okay for you if they submit those questions to BritCham and we forward them on to you?
Absolutely, you should.
Great.
Because as I said, it's just an introduction today, right? So
yeah,
I do want people to reflect. It's the first phase, right, of our adaptive leadership cycle. So reflection is important. Not everyone thinks through it straight away. So very important.
You've anticipated the next question, because at the top of your wheel was this whole thing about introspection. And what's being asked here, when is a good time to do this self-review, and how often should it be repeated, Paul?
In terms of the timing, when you feel that everything is crowding in on you, and you know what I mean by that, you know, emails, you know, social media, you know, wife, husband, you know, children, you know, when there's a whole lot of noise happening around you, yeah, and that noise is constant, then sometimes you just need to find a way to politely give yourself a break from it. I mean, and do something that you love doing. I mean, for me, I love walking. You know, I mean, I'm lucky, right, because I'm next to a park. So break the cycle. In other words, if you don't break that cycle of noise, it'll be very difficult for you to get into reflective space. And it's different strokes for different folks. Some people might do yoga, some people might meditate, some people might go for a walk, some people might play sport, whatever. Some people might get it in the shower, get some protection and safety and time in the shower, you know. But find those parts of your life that you really love and enjoy, and that's when some of your better ideas might come forward. So that's the bit on timing. Sorry, what was the second question?
There wasn't, but there is now.
There wasn't. Okay. All right. Yeah.
And it's the second question in two parts, and it really relates specifically to pandemic time. Part A of this is, which one of the 12 characteristics is most effective at this particular COVID situation time?
Yes.
Okay. And part two is, I think, a question of leadership, community leadership, national leadership.
Sure.
What kind of leadership is needed to ensure society follows with greater levels of discipline in order to be effective in these pandemic times?
Okay, thanks, Chris, and thank you, inquirer. Emotional intelligence is the one that you should be concentrating on the most. It's our second of the 12 leadership agility practices. And the reason I say that is that COVID-19, it's not just created turmoil in our working lives. It's for some people, sadly, it's created turmoil in their personal lives, and you know, and some individuals have actually lost people at this time as well. You really do need to listen out. As I say, first of all, make sure your own emotional state is good. You know, make sure you've got that calmness. It's very difficult dealing with other people's emotions if you're not calm yourself. That's the intrapersonal emotional intelligence. But then you just need to watch, listen, look out for things that, you know, where you're getting an unusual response from a staff member or from a colleague, because it's normally an indication that things aren't well emotionally. So I think this emotional intelligence is vital at the moment because of this multifaceted impact on our lives. And the second one, well, do you mind if I go back to Jacinda Ardern? Because you know, I said before that national cultures have responded differently. New Zealanders, if any of you know any New Zealanders, they're very can-do. They're very pragmatic. So, you know, although it's an English-speaking nation, they've got the Maori facet, cultural facet as well, which is very community-minded. It's we before I. We comes before I in New Zealand. Jacinda Ardern she's got a lovely blend of assertiveness, a clarity of purpose and decision making, and the ability to step into other people's shoes, the emotional intelligence. And she's faced 3 crisis situations recently and done remarkably well. And that's not by accident. I think that's because she's practiced and she's getting better at it. She's getting better at it as she goes. So I think coming back to whether people accept rules, it also depends on the role modeling of the senior leadership in our communities and nations. And as I said, being assertive, being clear, demonstrably emotionally intelligent, to show you actually care for people, is much better than trying to be too ambitious or to scale everything up before you've got practical measures in place first. In some instances, you can't rely on people being disciplined. They just won't be. So you have to put down clear boundaries. And New Zealand has for me, has struck a good balance there in the way that it's handled COVID-19, alongside other highly challenging events for New Zealand over the past year. So have a look at Jacinda. Have a look at Jacinda. That would be good.
Okay. Thanks very much, Paul. Of course, Indonesia is perhaps in a category all on its own, with its size, scale, yes, geographical reach, diversity, and so on and so forth. So lots of complexity. I'm afraid we have to draw a very, very interesting session to a close. It's great, I think, that we've had this session around the COVID time, because we're all very much in the middle of, and easy to be reminded of, exactly what disruption means and how we are reacting and what challenges it puts up. So very, very relevant. But before I close the webinar, I would just like to share with the participants that are with us. You may or may not know that BritCham recently established the BritCham Education Centre, and we are entering into partnerships with 12 to 15 British universities currently that are focused on qualifications that are about employability, and in particular employability that aligns with the goals, objectives and needs of Indonesia. But that also means we are embracing other opportunities in the space of human resource and people and professional development as well. As mentioned right at the beginning, this partnership with AgilityShip is a new partnership with BritCham, and we will shortly be working together, AgilityShip and BritCham, working with a major British certification body for universal accreditation of the 12 modules that Dr. Paul Aitken referred to at various points throughout this presentation, which was something of a preview of an entire professional development program. For those that have been on this webinar with us, there will be a one-time and exclusive offer of special and preferential terms for the first 5 companies only that sign up to the 12 module program. So our respective teams will be in touch with you to follow up on that regard as soon as we possibly can within the next week or 2 at the most. With that, I would particularly like to once again thank the sponsorship support of BP. Very highly appreciated, and in the background or the foreground as I speak, you will see the corporate promotion. BP has been a long supporter of BritCham, remains a sustaining category sponsor, and delighted that they're getting on board with us with webinars as the virtual replacement for events, and it's events that BritCham have the reputation of being the most active foreign chamber of commerce in Indonesia. With that, once again, Dr. Paul, thank you very much to everybody that's been on this webinar. We really appreciate you investing the 1 hour of time to join us. We certainly hope that you have you regard that you've had return on that investment. Please do send in your emails, questions, comments. We'd be delighted to get them all and forward them to Dr. Paul and his team. And with that, for those of you in about half an hour that will be buka puasa, we wish you well, and everybody stay healthy, be safe, and keep an eye on the BritCham webinar series, which moves to a digital opportunities series starting on Friday, as we look at the disruption of changes to how we have needed to use our IT and cybersecurity. A very good afternoon, early evening to Indonesia. From the UK, a very good morning approaching our noon. Bye-bye.
Bye-bye.